Hello everyone. Today's case took place in 2018 in Griffin, Georgia. Stephen Freeman and Mary Katherine Higdon met while still in school and had been dating for 7 years. Stephen Freeman was born on January 1, 1995 in Thomaston, Georgia, but grew up in Griffin. He was raised in a loving and closely knit family. His parents made every effort to provide the best start in life for Stephen and his brother. Stephen had a truly happy childhood, was well liked among his peers, and had a wide circle of friends, including 3 close friends with whom he spent a lot of time and had known since childhood. Stephen was an incurable optimist, always cheerful and smiling. He loved spending time outdoors, enjoying hiking, camping, hunting, and fishing. He felt his best during these activities. He had an exceptionally close bond with his mother. When she decided to continue her education, Stephen was immensely proud. After she obtained her diploma, he wrote her a letter starting with "To the most wonderful woman in the world." He thanked her for everything she had done for him and his brother, highlighting their admiration for her perseverance and dedication. Stephen had no problems expressing his feelings, often telling his loved ones that he loved them. Stephen met Mary Katherine Higdon, who was a year older, in high school, and it was love at first sight. The two quickly became inseparable, sharing common passions and interests. Mary Katherine also loved camping and eagerly joined Stephen and his friends on trips to the forest or for fishing. She was not intimidated by outdoor conditions and knew how to handle firearms well. Stephen's friends quickly accepted his girlfriend, and the couple seemed incredibly happy. Mary Katherine came from a loving family and as a child loved being the center of attention, often entertaining guests at family gatherings with singing and dancing. She was full of energy, creative, and loved nature and animals. After finishing school, Stephen and Mary Katherine moved in together. Stephen worked for a roofing company, while Mary Katherine was a teaching assistant at a kindergarten. By 2018, the year the events I'll describe took place, Stephen was 23 and Mary Katherine 24. They had been together for 7 years. Their relationship wasn't always perfect, with occasional arguments and even a brief breakup, but they always concluded that they wanted to stay together. Throughout these years, they got to know each other's families well. Mary Katherine would join Stephen's family for Sunday dinners every week, and Stephen's mother recalls treating her almost like a daughter. Both families also spent Christmas together. Mary Katherine and Stephen lived together on Sunnybrook Drive. On August 1, 2018, just before 11 p.m., an ambulance and a police car arrived on their street. A few minutes earlier, a hysterical Mary Katherine had called emergency services, stating that she had accidentally shot her boyfriend. Crying and apologizing, she struggled to explain what had happened, chaotically describing that she had merely tried to hand her boyfriend a gun, which unexpectedly fired. She claimed she didn't think the gun was loaded. When emergency personnel arrived and entered the apartment, they found a young man on a mattress in the living room, with a crying woman kneeling beside him. Upon seeing the responders, she began begging for help, so distraught that she could not be calmed, sobbing uncontrollably and gasping for breath, repeatedly pleading, "Please help me, please." As police officers tried to escort her from the room, she adamantly refused, screaming that she couldn't lose her boyfriend. Stephen still had a pulse and was immediately transported to the hospital. Only then were officers able to speak with Mary Katherine, though it was still difficult as she remained in shock. She persistently repeated that she didn't mean to do it, that the gun had accidentally discharged when she tried to hand it to Stephen, and that she didn't understand how it happened since she wasn't even aiming in that direction.
Hey, open door, open door.
Help me, please help me, please help me, please. We were just trying to get her. I was just getting my on the way to the bed.
Keep pressure on, keep
Please help me.
keep pressure on it.
Please help me. I am.
Somebody give me some gloves. Somebody give me some
Please
gloves.
help me. Please help me.
All right, get some gloves.
Check to see if he's got bullets. Out good. Very weak. Okay.
Ma'am, come on, come on.
Two rooms right now. One room. How many bullets were fired, man?
No, it was just one. I was just walking in here and I just.
Just one round was fired? Okay.
Out. It was just.
All right.
I just, because we like to sleep with the gun beside us.
Do me a
And
favor.
now we haven't moved our bed into the
Stand up, stand up, stand up.
Do me a favor, okay?
Yeah.
Let's get in here, let's do some work, okay? Go with that officer, go that way, please. Officer Johnson, okay? What's his name? What's his name?
Please, my dad's coming.
Ma'am, come on.
Ma'am, go that way.
I cannot lose him. I cannot lose him.
You got a stretcher outside yet?
Glove on, gentlemen, so.
Look, calm down, Paul. Calm down. Calm down.
Breathe.
I just literally, like, I was just wanting to go.
Okay, stop. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me. What's your name?
Mary Katherine.
Mary?
Yes, Mary Katherine.
All right, listen.
It turned out the couple typically kept a gun by their bed at night for protection. They owned about 10 guns, mainly hunting rifles, but not exclusively. On that fateful night, Mary Katherine had tried to hand Stephen a Glock 42, which discharged, shooting him in the chest just below the neck. Tragically, shortly after arriving at the hospital, Stephen died a few minutes before midnight. Despite Mary Katherine's explanations, the police also considered the possibility that it wasn't an accident. Evidence indicated a quarrel between the couple that evening, with food scattered across the kitchen counters and floor. It looked as if someone in a fit of rage had thrown everything within reach. Additionally, Mary Katherine's breath smelled of alcohol, and she occasionally mumbled incoherently. Therefore, the police decided to take the suspect to the station for questioning, and she agreed to go voluntarily. During the interview, she continued to insist that it was an accident. She repeated that she loved her boyfriend, that he was the love of her life and her best friend, and that she would never harm him. She also mentioned that hunting and firearms were their shared passion, which is why they had guns at home, but they were never loaded. According to Mary Katherine, she was very surprised when the gun went off. However, during the interrogation, the suspect used the phrase, "When I threw the gun to Stephen, it fired." This was a discrepancy compared to her initial statement at the scene, where she claimed she handed the gun to her boyfriend, not threw it while Stephen was sitting on the bed. The police had their suspicions from the beginning, but when Mary Katherine's version of events changed, they became convinced she was lying. This was particularly because she had significant experience with handling firearms. Besides working at the kindergarten, she was employed part-time at a local gun shop. She often boasted about knowing more about guns than the average person, even more than her boyfriend. As a shop employee, she was trained in not only handling firearms but also all safety procedures. Therefore, it was hard for the officers to believe that the suspect would just throw a gun to someone. They believed that not only would someone knowledgeable in firearms not do such a thing, but no normal person would. The investigators decided to use a more aggressive interrogation tactic. They directly told the suspect that they didn't believe a word she said, and to stop lying and tell the truth. They stated that they knew there had been a quarrel between her and Stephen, as evidenced by the state of the kitchen. When the officer raised his voice and the nature of the conversation abruptly changed, the woman began to cry. It was then that she supposedly said she pulled the trigger in a fit of anger. I use the word supposedly because that wasn't the end of the story. Initially, the investigators thought it was a straightforward case. When the suspect confessed, they believed they had quickly and efficiently concluded the investigation. Unfortunately, it turned out differently. There were technical issues in the interrogation room that day. Although the entire conversation with Mary Katherine was recorded, what we see happening cannot be heard clearly. Instead of what the parties say, there was a constant noise that drowned everything else out. The confession couldn't be heard. Nonetheless, Mary Katherine was arrested and charged with murder, despite the key evidence being practically useless. The investigators still believed they could prove her guilt, as they had other evidence they thought would suffice for a conviction. First, they believed the gun was loaded that fateful night. The grease inside the gun was evidence that the shooting of Stephen was not an accident. As Mary Katherine herself admitted during the interrogation, she had prepared a meal for her boyfriend, his favorite roast beef. Investigators later found pieces of the roast scattered throughout the kitchen. These greasy residues, according to the officers, suggested that the suspect had loaded the gun after making the meal. Additionally, the investigators decided to question the couple's friends. It then became clear that their relationship was far from perfect. Stephen's friends admitted that when they heard he had been shot, they immediately knew who was behind it, suspecting Mary Katherine. As it turned out, it wasn't the first time she had pointed a gun at her partner. It had happened several times before. Stephen had told his friends about it directly. The early years of their tumultuous relationship were happy, and they seemed exceptionally well matched. However, things gradually changed. Mary Katherine began to resent her partner practically over every little thing. According to Stephen's friends, Mary Katherine had become increasingly possessive, emotionally unstable, and simply dangerous. Over time, their relationship became toxic. She would often yell at her boyfriend in front of others and even push him. Arguments were a daily occurrence. Stephen would frequently leave their apartment, ending up having to block her number because she would call incessantly, giving him no peace. One of Stephen's co-workers testified that Mary Katherine once called Stephen 30 times before they even started work, and this happened multiple times. On April 21, 2018, 3 months before Stephen's death, he sent a text to a friend saying that Mary Katherine was running around screaming at the top of her lungs, threatening to shoot herself and Stephen. But it was a month later that Stephen became truly terrified. He told a friend that although his girlfriend had aimed a gun at him several times before, he saw something in her eyes recently that scared him. He was convinced that she was capable of pulling the trigger this time. Eventually, Stephen had enough of the emotional roller coaster. He decided to end the relationship and move to another city, planning to share an apartment with a friend. He intended to collect his belongings while Mary Katherine was at work and not inform her in advance. On August 3rd, he was supposed to finally free himself from her. Unfortunately, that didn't happen because he was shot 2 days earlier. Stephen never reported the previous incidents to the police. However, during the investigation, it was revealed that the authorities had been called to the couple's home 5 times in the past year. Several of these incidents involved domestic disputes. On July 30th, 2 days before the shooting, Stephen and Mary Katherine were still exchanging affectionate texts, wishing each other a good day and expressing their love. However, the next day was not as rosy. They likely had another argument. On the night of July 31st to August 1st, Stephen stayed at a friend's place, ignoring Mary Katherine's calls and texts. He even told his mother that he did not intend to return to the apartment he shared with her, as he was simply tired of it all. The next day, August 1st, after emotions had settled a bit, Mary Katherine decided to prepare dinner for both of them. She hoped they could eat together, talk, and reconcile as usual. But Stephen remained silent, did not come home, and still ignored her calls. This only made her angrier. She tried to find out where her partner was and contacted Stephen's mother, who informed her that Stephen was staying with his friend Thomas. Mary Katherine then decided to take action. She got into her car and headed toward Thomas's apartment. On the way, she spotted Thomas's car with both men inside. She initially followed closely behind them, then pulled alongside and opened her window. Stephen had no choice but to do the same. Mary Katherine began yelling at him, angrily asking if he would finally come home. Stephen, resigned, told her to calm down and said he would go with her. Unfortunately, this was a bad decision, as 2 hours later, an ambulance was rushing Stephen to the hospital. Ultimately, Mary Katherine was charged with murder, assault, and using a firearm to commit a felony. She was offered a plea deal that included imprisonment but with the possibility of parole. However, she rejected the offer, and the trial began on June 17, 2019. The prosecutor aimed to prove that the suspect killed her boyfriend in cold blood, driven primarily by anger. Evidence presented in court included greasy marks on the gun and stains on the sheet, which the prosecution argued indicated that Stephen was shot while sitting on the bed. He then simply fell backward onto the mattress, where he was later found. Bloodstains were only in one area on the sheet, in the corner of the bed, and nearby. Friends, family, and co-workers of Stephen testified in court. Their testimonies conveyed a consistent message: Stephen's relationship was toxic. The couple argued non-stop, and the suspect had previously threatened her boyfriend with a gun. She was possessive and problematic. The prosecutor emphasized that Mary Katherine had changed her version of events or added new details 6 times. During the trial, she planned to change her story once again. Mary Katherine declared that she was innocent and claimed that on that fateful night, she acted in self-defense. Mary Katherine's defense attorney argued that behind closed doors, Stephen was a completely different person, showing a side of himself that no one but the defendant knew about. The lawyer maintained that Stephen had a long history of various types of abuse towards his girlfriend. He was aggressive, impulsive, and jealous, dictating how Mary Katherine should behave, dress, and what she should eat. He controlled her spending and always needed to know where she was. He often hit her on the back of the head, and once even kicked her off the bed so forcefully that she hit her head on the door frame. The defense suggested that Stephen had issues with alcohol and other substances, which only fueled his aggressive behavior. As evidence, the lawyer presented 63 pages of hateful and vulgar messages that Stephen had sent to his girlfriend a year earlier, retrieved from her old phone's memory. At that time, Stephen had apparently discovered that during a brief breakup, Mary Katherine had slept with one of his friends. This enraged him, leading to a barrage of threatening and offensive texts. On one occasion, he sent her a photo of himself holding a dead fish with the caption, "This is you, B." Mary Katherine also took the stand, tearfully recounting what her relationship with Stephen had been like. She claimed that whenever she tried to stand up to him, he would warn her not to, or she would face twice the punishment. She testified that every morning she had to prepare Stephen's clothes and shoes, ensuring they were folded and placed in a specific spot. She also had to make sure everything was ready in the bathroom so that Stephen could just step in and take a warm shower. According to Mary Katherine, Stephen often accused her of infidelity, leading to arguments during which he would sometimes grab her wrists, shake her, or even hit her. Her lawyer read aloud some of Stephen's messages, including, "The more you say, the worse it will be for you when I get home. And I miss you so much, I'm coming home to you and it could end badly for you. You might end up in the Red Room tonight." When asked by her lawyer what Stephen meant by Red Room, Mary Katherine explained that it was a place where the less gentle intimacies occurred. Stephen would tie her up, choke her, or hit her. Through tears, Mary Katherine revealed that there had been 2 instances where Stephen went too far and continued intercourse without her consent. One such incident occurred after a trip to Disneyland. That day, Stephen was exceptionally aggressive, and despite Mary Katherine's pleas for him to stop, Stephen reportedly responded that he had spent so much money on her that he deserved to get what he wanted in return. Mary Katherine claimed that it was this fear of her partner and the knowledge of what he was capable of that caused her to react so emotionally on the fateful night of August 1st. She testified that she told Stephen she no longer wanted to be with him, which sent him into a rage. He began throwing the food she had prepared for him and pushing her. According to Mary Katherine, it was at that moment she grabbed the gun and told Stephen to get out of her apartment. Mary Katherine remembered next that Stephen lunged at her, and a moment later he was already injured, telling her to call an ambulance. She stated that everything happened very quickly, in a split second. Mary Katherine insisted that she did not want to hurt Stephen and had no intention of killing him. Interestingly, it was only during the court hearing that she first mentioned that Stephen had lunged at her and that he had previously been aggressive towards her. During police interrogations, she had not mentioned this at all. The prosecutor pointed out this inconsistency and additionally asked why she had never reported these instances of abuse to the police. Mary Katherine responded that she always blamed herself for everything and was convinced that she should try harder not to provoke Stephen. Regarding the police interrogations, she maintained that she was too embarrassed by the acts of violence in their relationship to tell the investigators directly.
Yes. When it was good, but when it was bad, it was bad. You expect, his clothes all ready and folded and his shoes where it needed to be. He'd want me to make sure his shower was started for him. He said, "I miss you too much. I'm coming home to you and you're about to get it bad. You're going to the Red Room tonight." It wasn't any specific room, but it was just when we would bring out these certain things that we had bought.
What would happen in the Red Room?
He'd just tie me up and hit me. He started hurting me really, really bad. I said, "Stephen, please stop." And he said that since he spends so much money at me at Disney, I need to give him what he deserves. Throwing things, started, pushing me around. And that's when I got scared. And I just wanted him out of the house. And then that's the next thing I remember is him lunging at me. And then the next thing that I remember then is him standing there saying, "Call 911.
Can I give you a minute to show me in those text messages between you and he and you and every other person that was in your cell phone where you talk about him being physically violent?
I never talked about it, only with friends. I never texted out.
Then, the prosecutor has her own surprise for the court. Hours before killing Stephen, Mary Katherine was searching violent internet pornography sites while at a babysitting job.
All of those and many more you looked up when Stephen was not with you. But it was him that liked the red room. Is that your testimony?
Yes, I looked up things for ideas because obviously he's gone. I wanted to please him.
Hey, Stephen. And when he doesn't, he is shot in the left side of the neck where you know that he's not facing her. He never sees it coming.
Although the victim's friends claimed that it was Mary Katherine who was aggressive, not Stephen, her sister testified that she had seen marks on Mary Katherine's arms several times. Once she even asked about them, and Mary Katherine replied that Stephen had grabbed her a bit too hard. However, besides her sister's testimony and Mary Katherine's words, no evidence was presented in court to support the theory that Stephen was the aggressor. There were no police reports or medical documentation. The prosecutor decided to address another issue. Data from Mary Katherine's phone browser history showed that just a few hours before she pulled the trigger, she had searched for adult websites featuring scenes of violence and aggression. She viewed these contents during working hours while caring for a child. According to the prosecutor, it was hard to believe that someone who was experiencing the trauma Mary Katherine described would view such content. Mary Katherine tried to defend herself, claiming that she did this only to later satisfy Stephen. She insisted that she had never pointed a gun at her partner before. She admitted that during arguments she had held a gun a few times but only threatened to take her own life, not Stephen's. It was true that Mary Katherine had repeatedly threatened to take her own life, a fact even confirmed by her own father. Stephen's close ones believed that he delayed ending the relationship because he feared Mary Katherine would actually harm herself. The defense prepared by her lawyer focused on highlighting evidence that she acted in self-defense. An expert witness testified that the defendant showed signs of battered woman syndrome. However, the prosecutor also called an expert witness who argued the opposite, stating that there were no such signs. The prosecutor argued that all the evidence and facts established during the investigation contradicted Mary Katherine's statements. Firstly, Mary Katherine claimed Stephen lunged at her, but the marks on the bed sheet suggested that he was shot while sitting on the bed. Secondly, the defendant mentioned that she wanted to break up that evening, yet she had been trying to contact Stephen all day. She prepared dinner in hopes of reconciling and went looking for her boyfriend when he didn't come home. Unfortunately, the recording of the police interrogation where she allegedly confessed could not be used as evidence in court. Nevertheless, this was not the only shortcoming in the investigation. It turned out that the officers who first arrived at the scene placed the gun found next to the victim in a paper bag for safety reasons, fearing the hysterical woman might harm herself. They decided to secure the weapon but did not even take photos to document its original position. Why they chose to secure the gun instead of removing Mary Katherine from the room remains unknown. The jurors deliberated for 4 hours and eventually reached a consensus. Mary Katherine was completely acquitted. Interestingly, most jurors believed that the defendant committed the alleged acts but felt that sufficient evidence to prove her guilt beyond a reasonable doubt was not presented in court. They believed the police investigation was not conducted properly, from moving the weapon to the useless confession recording, and not reviewing Stephen's phone data. They lacked a full picture of the couple's relationship and what kind of person Stephen was. They could only rely on what remained on Mary Katherine's phone. On June 26, 2019, Mary Katherine was released from custody. She is now a free woman. Stephen's close ones were shocked and disgusted by the verdict, feeling that justice was not served. Stephen's mother actively participates in various anti-domestic violence campaigns, emphasizing that violence knows no gender and can affect anyone, regardless of whether they are a woman or a man. Thank you for listening to this tragic story.